Hi friends, it's Brittany at Ink and Papyrus and welcome back to my channel. Do you need liberated from your scraps? I know I do. Listen, I have three cartons of these bad boys stacked up. And you know why? Because I throw everything in here, things that I shouldn't, and I have not taken the time to sort through them. And I think I find the size, the odd shapes, and just the lackluster scraps boring. Well, we're going to liven them up today. I'm going to give you a bunch of tips and tricks to do so, and I guarantee you, you are not going to be able to stop creating with these scraps once we doll them all up. So grab your scraps. I know you have plenty of them, and let's get to it. These scraps I have in front of me, I took through a similar process way back when, but I think I have a ton more ideas to distress them. But you see how cool and vintage and just chic these are? They're fabulous. See here, I have a ton of different pages. I have cardstock, book pages, white pages, darker colored pages. We're going to go through a ton of ways to distress these that look good on dark pages and light pages, and I'm going to show you how to easily and quickly mute these backgrounds. And worst comes to worst, a lot of the decorative pages are single-sided. So in the way that we're going to do this, you're going to end up with gorgeous scraps that have decor on both sides. So don't worry if you don't like the way, if you have really busy pattern paper and you don't like the way the distress looks on that side, we just flip it over onto the other side. So don't worry, just grab what you have. I promise you this is going to be super relaxing and you are going to love the finished results. Even though this is totally haphazard, this is totally one of these projects you don't need to overthink, and brace yourself. It's about to get messy. So first things first, you have to grab yourself a cardboard box. This is not optional. Guys, you need the box. And actually, a paper bag, a big paper bag would work fine too. But this is going to be super, super messy. There's going to be ink everywhere and a lot of splatters. Trust me, get a box or a bag. So this first part is very, very boring, but this might be the most important part. I just want you to pour all of your scraps out. Let's see what we're working with. If you're anything like me, you're going to find fabric and a bunch of other stuff that didn't belong there in the first place. And honestly, it's just a good way to kind of clean house, so to speak. This next part is really important though, because I think this is why we hesitate to use our scraps. You'll see a lot of the scraps I have, some of them are from when I fussy cutted things, and so there are some really awkward edges and ends, and I know it sounds silly, but I really think that's why I hesitate sometimes to use these scraps, because some of them are huge, some of them are like half a page of cardstock, and then I have these ditzy little things that I'm like, why didn't I just throw that away? And then trying to find something that I like that fits the project I'm working on. It's just, I don't know. And I'm sure there are better ways to organize your scraps. I will get to that at some point. But if you if you take them all to bite size, and not just all bite size, actually, that's a poor way of putting this. What you ought to do, what I think is the most helpful, is get rid of the odd ends, okay? And then we're going to make scraps of varying sizes, okay? You can make triangles, some large triangles, some small triangles, some squares. And then maybe for the next piece you have, you just rip stuff, right? Having, which honestly the ink soaks up so well when you rip stuff anyway, so this would be perfect for that. But just get your scraps to a manageable level, like a manageable size with a variety of sizes and shapes that you will use on a regular basis. And when you have a variety of scraps, you're not going to go digging through your thing and be like, oh, I don't have what I want. And I think that's a great place to start. I would also challenge you, if you have old cardstock that's been laying around for years and you feel like the theme and the style just really isn't for you, rip that up or cut it up and throw it in your scrap pile. We can transform it into something that you will craft with. And then those ephemera packs, maybe You know, sometimes the previews are like kind of shoddy and you really weren't sure what you were ordering and it showed up and it also really isn't just you. We can alter them. So don't just let it hang around taking up space. Rip it up, tear it up, and throw it in the scrap collection, and we can turn it into something that you will love. In going through my pile of scraps, I did find some pages that I decided would not be good for this project. Anything with a really shiny surface probably isn't going to soak up ink well. I will say that the vellum pleasantly surprised me. It seemed to, now you certainly will have to let it dry for longer, but it surprised me with how well the paper took to the processes we're gonna put it through. The glitter confetti paper I took out. For some reason I had some aluminum foil in here. Obviously those things had to go. But you know what I did do is I took this as an opportunity to cut those scraps up into more manageable bits that I will craft with and just put them in one of my other many, as I told you, scrap boxes. This is my favorite go-to way for livening up. I know you guys have this problem too. You fussy cut out a ton of digital images or, you know, whatever else from plain copy paper, and you're just like, what am I going to do with all this plain white paper? Well, this is the perfect solution. Some other pages that look amazing. If you have old maps lying around and or music paper, book pages as well, this process is perfect for livening those up. I think it makes them look absolutely stunning. Now is also the time to be creative. In addition to just snipping pages with regular scissors and tearing them, you can grab some deckled edge scissors. That really makes these scraps interesting. You can also take some paper punches, whatever paper punches you have. I'm working on a journal for my dog right now. I have some dog punches, some paw punches, some like bone punches. Maybe I'll punch, you know, some of those shapes out. And I also am working on an ocean themed journal. I have a dolphin paper punch and I think a seashell paper punch. So, you know, think about the kinds of projects you're working on and the kind of scraps you may want to create. These are all just different ways to liven up these boring scraps. Also, if you have a stash of leftover book pages and magazine pages you're not sure what to do with, don't overthink it. Just send them through your paper cutter, chop, 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 and put them in the box. To keep it interesting, I put a few embossed papers in the box as well. After I chop them up, it just is going to add another layer of texture to these scraps. I was so excited when I got to the end of the scrap bin. I felt like I had just taken on the world. Okay, so we finally have all of our scraps in the box, cut to size, whatever size we want, and punched, you know, shaped if we so choose. Okay, here comes the messy part. Right now, we are just gonna focus on getting a base color and like base grunge on all of these scraps. The one thing I wish I would have done is worn like one of those like kitchen gloves. I did not. My hands are, I'm doing the voiceover like a day and a half later and my fingers are still stained. So I would definitely recommend grabbing some kitchen gloves. We're gonna coat these puppies up in multiple different layers. What I would recommend is separating. So what I did was I separated my scraps into about 3 or 4 different groups because I knew I would want a different themed color scheme with every different group of scraps. So one, which, you know, they're, if you don't want to do it like this and you want your scraps to be all different kinds of colors, that's totally fine. I wanted more of a grunge, vintage, like brown, and gold on some of them, and then I wanted some bright, and I used more of a like light pink shimmer green, like think like Actually, the Tim Holtz color is cracked pistachio. I thought those looked amazing together. And then I wanted some browns and blues, like think faded blue jean color. So that's why I decided to group my scraps into 3 different sections. And all I did was, take a handful, put it in the box, and put the rest off to the side on my desk. And once we were done with the process, I just went on to the next theme color group. I hope that makes sense. The one thing I will say is I think I made my life very difficult by adding too many scraps to the box at once. I kept going through, and even still, the first part of the process is getting that base color. Even though I thought I colored these, I sprayed these down multiple times and shifted the box around and sprayed and shifted and sprayed and shifted. There was still, when I got to the second part, there were still pieces where I felt like did not hardly have any grunge on them. And that is okay if that happens to you. We can add them, we can add grunge in the second step where we actually take the pieces out and individually work on them, though that is a little bit more difficult and a bit more messy. So I would recommend, maybe even if you separate them into color schemes, maybe you would want to do like an A and a B, like do one group brown and blue and then dump your scraps out, and then do a second group brown and blue, just to make it a little bit more manageable. Okay, so what am I using to provide that first layer of grunge? I'm so glad you asked. Well, so for the very first part of this, most of what I used were Tim Holtz Distress Oxide sprays. I have a big bottle, I think it used to be like a hair conditioner, one of those spray conditioner bottles. It's perfect, and the thing is, like, the tube inside is like big enough that it doesn't get clogged up as easily as some of the smaller bottles you may buy in the craft store. But what I do is I put instant coffee and water and always add rubbing alcohol, and that has kept it from getting moldy. You have to add that rubbing alcohol or else mold develops really quickly. But I love using this as the base kind of grunge for everything. Also, it does a good job of dampening up the pages so that they soak up a bit more ink and get that kind of like crinkly feel to them. So that's what I'm doing for this very first part, to grunge these up. If you don't have distress sprays, that is okay. One of my favorite ways to make spray dyes, spray inks, without actually purchasing these, is to use food coloring. So if you get those little plastic bottles from the craft store, or you could use leftover bottles if you, let's say you run out of spray, just water and whatever food coloring you have laying around works amazing. A little bit of food coloring goes a long way. I've also seen people use old beets, which any kind of foods I would recommend adding rubbing alcohol so you don't start getting mold in your bottles. Tea works well. I have to say, food coloring is such a winner. I have taken old sprinkles before and wet them and gotten some color from them. It's certainly not as strong or as pigmented as food coloring. The other thing I like is sometimes I'll use old makeup palettes for that shimmer. I would recommend using a heavier duty bottle because I find no matter how finely you chop up the palette pigments, it seems like eventually they clump to the bottom of the bottle and sort of clog up the spray plunger. I'm going to show you though, and you'll see shortly, I have a bottle that stopped working on me, and so instead of, sweating it, I simply take the cap off the bottle and kind of just throw the ink over the pages, and it works just fine. You'll want to play around with the splatters you use. So, if some of the scraps, maybe take your ink and get a fine pigment on. And you do that by kind of holding your bottle a little bit further away and just quickly pressing the plunger down. Now, if you slowly press the plunger down and you're a little bit closer, then you'll get those nice sort of droplets instead of that fine mist. Personally, I kind of like this look a little bit better. And when you're shaking the papers back and forth, they're going to kind of run together and it's going to disperse the ink well. I'm trying to think. So we're going to add some color, some pigment to our scraps, later. So certainly this is just the very first step in the process. So don't think that, oh gosh, it's not as distressed as I want it to be. This is simply we're priming our papers for the very next step. Okay, so next I am going in with a watercolor palette and doing a bunch of splatters. Again, you can get a good thick drops with the Distress Oxide, but only if you hold it really close and press down on the plunger really slowly. And again, to do that technique and cover all of the scraps would take forever and a day. So I think adding the paint splatters is really important. It just adds another really nice layer to all of this. And this palette I thought was perfect because I'm trying to kind of stay with the blue, green, brown theme for these specific scraps. You'll see me use other colors, but in general, I'm trying to kind of keep it to the blues and the greens. You may be asking, well, can I use acrylic paint? Yes, but so you can, but I'm telling you, your scraps, when they dry, they're going to be stuck together. And even I love using gesso as another layer to these, but you'll see even I kind of struggled to free the papers from themselves at times. And it actually created a really cool effect. The ripping of the paper kind of left really thin layers of different papers on other scraps, which actually provided really cool effect, but it's kind of time consuming to pry them apart. And actually halfway through the process, I switched to using the gesso when the scraps were already, and I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead, but when the scraps were already laid out individually, you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. But that's why I would really, really, really recommend using watercolor paints. Anything sticky like gesso and acrylic paint is going to make it really, really hard to free your scraps from each other. You're going to end up with scrap balls that you have to pry apart. And it's just another time consuming thing that isn't really fun. So trust me on this, use watercolor. You're going to need a ton of water to do these splatters. Get yourself, it's probably easier to use one of these paintbrushes like you see me using here with the water already built into it. And even still, you're going to end up refilling it multiple times. And at one point, my palette was so saturated, I just tipped it over and let everything just kind of drip onto the papers. That's how saturated your palette should be to do this. Be very careful. You would be surprised at how far, when you're doing these splatters, how far those splatters can reach. I would do these away from walls and any furniture that you care about. Ideally, these would be done outside, but I'm in North Carolina, it is way too hot for that right now. So yeah, just be careful. Maybe lay some newspapers down before you do all your splattering. Splattering definitely creates a special layer and a look that really nothing else we're going to use can. So I definitely would recommend not skipping this step. And if you have a bunch of large white scraps or lighter scraps and you're really feeling it, you can even just take your paintbrush and create some brush strokes and do some mark making. I don't know, have fun with it, guys. This is meant to be fun. And the more layers you add, just the funner and the livelier your scraps are going to be. So gesso. Gesso is another layer that looks amazing on these, but as I sort of alluded to earlier, I kind of regret doing it in this specific step because it really made my pages all stick together. If you don't mind and are actually trying to get some pages to peel off onto each other, it's a good technique to use. If you don't want to have to deal with the headache, I recommend skipping the gesso for a little bit later on in the process. And I'm sure you know by now, but every layer you add every color and texture should be followed by you reaching the bin, shaking everything all up again. This is really, really, really important. It creates more layers to your pages, and it ensures that none of your scraps are forgotten about and all of them get some baseline level of color. Okay, so let the ink dry. A couple hours will do, if that. Honestly, they should be, it depends on how much saturating you did. If, you used a bunch of gesso and, saturated them with watercolor paint and coffee spray, it's probably best that you let them dry overnight, because when you start kind of pulling them apart, if they're still wet, they're going to rip. So I just let mine dry overnight and came back to it the next day. And like I said earlier, I did have to kind of pry these apart, and that took another like 20 or so minutes. But I think most of the issue came down to the gesso. If you only use watercolor paints and coffee sprays and inks, there really should be very little pulling apart that you had to do. Like I said, it did create a cool effect, especially with the book pages. Some of the pages had layers of pages on top from other pages sticking to them, and it actually created some texture and some dimension I wasn't expecting. It did add another headache, and if you like the look of the gesso, which I really recommend you do, it adds a whole another layer to this. Wait until we lay our pages out. So pull apart your pages, and then we want to start forming a layer on our desk. Again, you want a craft mat or newspapers underneath, because we are nowhere near done dolling up these little scraps. As I sweat and pull these apart, I should mention a couple of other pages that looked amazing that I am so loving. I cut up some old jelly prints I felt like just didn't really do anything for me. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Once I got a layer of grunge on them, all of a sudden they look so lively and so amazing. So old jelly prints and then brown paper packaging, especially brown paper packaging that if you crumble it up and really get some wrinkles going on it, it seems like it absorbs the ink so well. And so I ripped some brown paper packaging up, and gosh, this stuff is so abundant. I like every package you order now comes with brown paper packaging. And I now it's so pretty. I love working with it so much. I have a hard time like throwing any of it away. So now I have too much of it, and this was the perfect place to put it. I can't, this is definitely one of my absolute favorite scraps to use. After I removed my scraps from the box, I started piling them on top of each other and putting heavy things on top of them. Textbooks, bottles of things, staplers, anything you have on your desk works just fine. The flatter you're able to lay your scraps for this next part, the better off you're going to be. Okay guys, this is where these scraps come alive. Now, clear your craft surface as much as you can. I want you to put down a craft mat or some newspaper. The larger the surface you have to lay your scraps out, the faster this process is going to go, and the more scraps you'll be able to cover in a shorter period of time. Okay, so I want you to lay your scraps out kind of like a puzzle. It's fine if there's some small gaps in between, and it's fine if they overlap a little bit. But in general, you want to have your scraps so that they're laid out in a way where at least most of the scrap is sticking up at any given time. So you're going to have to do this multiple times with your scrap pile. Okay, once you have your scraps laid out, I want you to grab, a couple of supplies. I want you to grab some stamps. Large stamps work really, really well because you can apply color to these very, very quickly. I want you to grab some stamp pads, usually a black, a brown, and then maybe a couple of brighter colors work really, really, really well. The stamps that I love to use for these, of course you can use any, but the ones that really, really work to give these scraps a nice vintage feel are something with a repeating pattern. Okay, script stamps, so like faux word stamps, like if you have a big thing of music notes or a big large stamp with script on it, that's incredible. And then you want to grab some postage stamps or tickets. I think that looks incredible as well. Even better if they're like, if it's a large stamp with a bunch of postage stamps on it or a bunch of tickets on it. If they're just individual postage stamps or tickets, that is totally fine too. And then a water bottle, just a spritzer that you can use to spray your stamps to either clean them or get a really goopy kind of watery, blurry image going on some of them is amazing. And then some gold gilding wax. Now, if you don't have all of these supplies, that's totally fine. You'll be able to get the effect, I think, with just any kind of stamp you have. And then this is where you may also want to grab some white gesso. The secret to this, I think, is truly that when your scraps are spread out like the way they are and you're using a large stamp, you're getting different portions of the stamp onto the paper that are sort of continuing like off the page, instead of doing what looks like a pre-planned, just direct stamping. It looks incredible when you have multiple stamps on a paper and they're coming off of the page. That's what gives them this unique, sort of natural kind of grunge look. Okay, you'll see I have a few scraps, mainly that highlights scrap that like is not gonna work. I actually, the first scraps of this that I put down were unfortunate. This is, you're learning from my mistakes. I put too many scraps into the bin, and so no matter how many times I thought I had coated everything, there was still a small portion at the bottom, I guess, that did not really get all that much color. Okay, so these are going to need a little extra love and attention, and that highlights paper is not doing it for me. So this is where your gesso comes in. Now you don't have to use white gesso necessarily, but I don't know, the white gesso is working for me. And I think the other thing is like some of these papers are too busy for my liking. So by going in with white gesso, I'm creating a neutral background that allows me to stamp and put paint down and whatever else I want to, while still muting the background. I hope that makes sense. Also, when you're laying your papers down to do this, when you're originally laying them down in puzzle formation, make a note to yourself of which side you like. Okay, it may not be obvious. You may have put in pretty cardstock you think you liked, but when you grunged it up, somehow this miraculous, like gorgeous, unique looking pattern formed on the back. All right, so that's the side we're working with. So then make a decision and turn it over then. You're gonna wanna pick which side of the paper you're gonna want, because obviously we're using these as scraps to layer collage down on another project, and one side is going to be hidden forever. Sorry, I know it might be difficult sometimes, but you are going to have to choose a side. When you're livening these up, maybe you want to pick a script stamp and then a postage stamp. Maybe you want them in the same color, maybe you want them in a different color. Don't rule anything out. I can tell you some of these scraps, I was really going for a grungy sort of look and thought I was going to stick with browns and blacks, and I pulled out, it's probably later on in the video, but I pulled out this, the Tim Holtz ink. It's a blue, it's called like Blueprint Sketch, I believe it is. It looked incredible, and purple as well, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm kind of ruining these are going to be eclectic and not grungy at all. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm telling you, just go with it. Be bold. You will absolutely love the results. And this white gesso I have, especially if you're only putting on a really thin coat, it dries so fast that I can tell you it didn't really hold me up in the process at all. I kind of just went over the scraps that I needed to with a little bit of the white gesso, and by the time I was done like decorating and just dressing all the other scraps, the ones that I had gessoed were like already done and ready to be stamped on and distress some more. So don't let that stop you. just make sure you're applying a really, really, really light coat. And I can tell you the gesso looked incredible on the brown paper packaging. You're going to need a really dark ink. If when you stamp on the brown paper packaging, you're going to need some dark inks to really enhance them. Either put a thin coat of gesso on or just splatter a little bit of gesso on them. That obviously will take a little bit longer to dry. Or just take a brush that looks like it's got no gesso on left and just kind of like push it down on the paper, and just it just gives a really, really nice kind of distressed, weathered look to it. The other thing that looks incredible is just taking some gold gilding wax and just going around some of the papers with a little bit of wax. You don't need to cover all of it. Just adding like a little bit of luster here and there looks incredible. And this stuff also dries really fast, so no need to worry about that. It just adds a whole nother like special touch to these. So the gesso is perfect for those pieces that maybe got a little too much ink and you feel that they're already grunged up enough that if you stamped over them, they would be too busy and cluttered appearing. Just adding a little area of gesso can really help kind of mute things and make some stamping on them still look good. And as you can see, I also had some darker black construction pieces that didn't really pick up a whole lot of ink. You can't really see much of the distress on them. Just adding a fine layer of gesso over top makes it so that you can stamp or distress these in any way you can. And like I said, if you make it a really, really thin layer, by the time you're done fussing with all your other stamps in that particular layer, your gesso will be dry and you'll be good to stamp on. And actually, I transferred some of the wet gesso by accident onto some of the other pages when I was stamping, and it actually looked incredible. So don't rule that out as another mechanism to giving these some texture. I have to say, I can't believe how livened up and interesting some of these plain book pages and plain white pages, like plain copy paper I had left over from fussy cutting. I could not believe how good it looked when I was done. I like these. I feel like some of these are so nice. These are things that I would pay for, like vintage ephemera in a pack. Like, I can't believe I created these myself with very little thought or effort. And one of the other things that I meant to tell you guys is some of these layers, I just took the entire stamp pad itself and just pressed down and made impressions that way. Like, you don't even need a stamp. All you have to do is take the ink pad and like press it down. The other thing that would look incredible that I did not do in this batch, but get some gelatos and just do a little bit of scribbling. And when you add other inks or anything remotely like wet, the gesso will, or sorry, the gelatos will bleed, and it will look incredible. Alternatively, you could, scribble a little bit and then go over just with a plain, just with a wet paintbrush, and just create a little bit more color. That way, that also would look incredible. I have to say, this is one of the most relaxing and satisfying crafts I have done in a long time. If you feel like you are overwhelmed with your scraps, if you feel like you have to dig to the bottom of boxes to find something that you're looking for, find the right size, find something that you can use in your crafts, you are not doing it right. You need to take the time to go through your scraps, chop them up into manageable bits, and put some flair on them so that you have a manageable scrap pile and so that you have a huge supply of things to pick from. It is an awesome feeling. And it is so worth your time. This is one of the hacks that has really changed the way that I craft. It's sad that it took me this long to kind of go back through my scraps that I've reaccumulated, but this has really made crafting so much more manageable and so much more enjoyable. And I hope to bring you more projects like this in the future where we can focus on making the most of the supplies that we already have in front of us and decluttering and destashing. You are so much more effective and happier as a crafter when you're not piled under mountains of things and overwhelmed. So all we do is layer pages down, put some gesso on them if you so choose, put a little bit more ink on them if you would like, do some stamping, some distressing, maybe a little bit of mark making, and put them back in the box and then layer them back down on the table and repeat the process. And by the time we're done with this, you're gonna have scraps that you feel like you probably should have paid for. Like they look like they would have come out of a cute little vintage ephemera pack you would have paid 10, maybe $15 for, and you're gonna be thrilled with these. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you found value in this and you enjoyed this, please hit that like and subscribe button and watch out for an upcoming video where we take these gorgeous scraps and turn them into some of the most beautiful projects you have ever created. So keep a lookout. That is coming up next week, and I can't wait to see you then.